Have you ever found yourself instinctively swiping away every app on your phone, convinced you're saving precious battery life? It's almost become second nature. Open the app switcher, clear everything, and feel like you've just done your phone a favor. Maybe you've even been told this trick by friends or seen it recommended online. But what if this habit, repeated millions of times every day, isn't actually helping at all? What if in some cases it's doing the exact opposite? Today, we will uncover the surprising truth behind one of the most common smartphone myths, right here on History of Simple Things. To understand whether closing apps really saves battery, we first need to look at how modern smartphones actually work. Most people imagine apps like open tabs on a computer, each one actively running in the background, constantly draining power. That mental image makes it seem logical to close everything. After all, fewer running apps should mean less battery usage, right? But smartphones, especially modern ones, don't operate that way. Both Android and iOS are designed to manage apps intelligently. When you leave an app, it doesn't usually keep running at full power. Instead, the system moves it into a suspended state. Think of it like putting a book down with a bookmark. You can quickly return to where you left off without reopening it from scratch. In this suspended state, the app uses little to no battery at all. This is where things get interesting. When you manually close an app, force quitting it, you're not just cleaning up. You're actually telling your phone to completely shut that app down. And the next time you open it, your phone has to reload everything from the beginning. That process requires more CPU power, more memory usage, and ultimately more battery than simply resuming a paused app. In other words, constantly closing apps can sometimes use more battery, not less. This idea might sound counterintuitive, but it's backed by how operating systems are designed. Engineers have spent years optimizing how apps behave in the background. They limit what apps can do when you're not actively using them, preventing unnecessary battery drain. For example, background apps are often restricted from using the processor heavily, accessing location data frequently, or running continuous tasks unless absolutely necessary. That said, not all apps behave perfectly. Some apps, especially poorly optimized ones, can still consume battery in the background. These might include apps that constantly refresh data, track your location, or run background services like music streaming or navigation. In those cases, closing the app can help. But these are exceptions, not the rule. So why does the myth persist? Part of the reason comes from older technology. Years ago, early smartphones didn't manage background apps as efficiently as they do today. Back then, closing apps could genuinely improve performance and battery life. People learned that habit, and it stuck even as the technology evolved. Another reason is psychological. Clearing your recent apps gives a sense of control. It feels like tidying up a cluttered desk. Even though the system doesn't actually need that cleanup, it creates the illusion of optimization. It's a satisfying action even if it's unnecessary. There's also a misunderstanding between performance and battery life. Sometimes closing apps can make your phone feel faster, especially if an app was misbehaving. But that doesn't automatically mean it's saving energy. In fact, restarting apps repeatedly can put more strain on the system. Modern smartphones even provide tools to monitor battery usage. If you check your battery settings, you can see which apps are consuming the most power. This is a far more effective approach than blindly closing everything. Instead of treating all apps as guilty, you can identify the actual culprits. There are, however, a few situations where closing apps makes sense. If an app freezes or crashes, force quitting it can resolve the issue. If an app is clearly draining battery, like one that's stuck using GPS or constantly refreshing, closing it can help. And if you're troubleshooting a problem, restarting apps can be part of the solution. But as a daily habit, closing every app simply isn't needed. Battery life is influenced by many other factors that have a much bigger impact. Screen brightness, for example, is one of the largest contributors to battery drain. The longer and brighter your screen stays on, the more power it uses. Network activity is another major factor, especially when your phone struggles to maintain a signal, causing it to work harder. Background features like location services, push notifications, and automatic updates also play a role. Managing these settings can have a far more noticeable effect on battery life than closing apps ever will. There's also the role of software optimization. Both Android and iOS continuously learn your usage patterns. They prioritize apps you use frequently and limit those you rarely open. This adaptive behavior helps conserve battery without requiring constant manual intervention. Interestingly, even major tech companies have addressed this myth. Developers and engineers have clarified that force-closing apps should only be done when necessary, not as a routine. In fact, some have explicitly stated that doing so can reduce efficiency. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? Closing apps doesn't usually save battery. In many cases, it can actually use more power by forcing your phone to restart apps repeatedly. Modern smartphones are designed to manage resources intelligently, keeping apps in a low-power state when not in use. The next time you feel the urge to swipe away every app, you might pause for a second and reconsider. Your phone is already doing the work for you, quietly optimizing everything behind the scenes. And sometimes, the simplest habits we believe in, like closing apps to save battery, turn out to be not so simple after all. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.